We have this dream that sexual exploitation would end.
About 10 years ago, I had an opportunity to meet somebody that was working on human trafficking in India and foreign countries, Thailand, building safe houses for girls. Halfway through her presentation talking about the safe houses, she stopped and said, "I can see by the look in your guys' eye that you think this is only happening in Thailand and India."
But it turns out it's happening here as well. It's happening in our hotels, in our cities, and it's happening in massage parlor brothels, and it's happening in back rooms of bars. It's sort of easy to ignore if it feels like it's over there, but now it's right here. And these girls are my sisters and granddaughters and daughters, and we can't ignore it anymore.
The thought of a girl on our street in Seattle thinking as she's being abused 10, 15 times a day, the thought of her not believing that anybody in this world cares about her, it blows my heart up.
We're sick about this thing. Like, we can't believe that girls are being exploited in hotel rooms in our town, and we want to do something. What do we do? A couple things we decided is, one, we didn't need another nonprofit in the space because there were lots doing it already. But we did need something that would be overarching, that would tie these nonprofits together.
Any kind of nonprofit work, any kind of movement cause can sometimes be fractured, and there can be a lot of duplication of efforts. One group's doing this and they're overlapping here and nobody's working together.
And we said, I think we need to start SAFE. SAFE was the name we came up with, Strategic Alliance to Fight Exploitation. But then we needed a way to make SAFE go without being another nonprofit that was going to compete against the nonprofits that were out there. And so we started looking at models. The SAFE model happened. You can think of it as like an hourglass where there's a bunch of donors that have given into this donor advice fund. And then we've given it out to fight sexual exploitation in Washington state from that donor advice fund. That allows us to send almost all the money that comes in out to the movement, out to the most critical needs so that girls and women don't have to be sexually exploited anymore.
It allows us to be really lean. We don't have to spend all the money on being a nonprofit.
What I believe we have here is a movement funding machine. And what we've seen is that demand is going down.
3 years ago, there were 10 girls arrested for every one man. In 3 years, it's completely reversed itself.
One of the stories I'm going to write about today is there was a girl that just last week, she was in a hotel room having men come in every half hour. She's been doing it for years. And last week she got out. She doesn't have anybody exploiting her.
Our prayer and our hope would be that every state in the country would take this model and run with it. We don't want to compete for the money. We want to bring it in and then let it go. We're raising money to fund the cause, and we want to fund the most important things that are going to have the biggest impact right now.
And I believe that SAFE is a spark. And if we can get sparks across this country, it will become a flame, and it could change everything. If we can fund them and resource them to do more of their work, less women will be sold for sex every day, and that matters.
Well, that video is no less sobering than the first time I watched it. And I think every time I've seen it, I've probably watched it a dozen or so times now. It is equally as challenging, kind of gut-wrenching, but also inspiring and hope-filled. Well, we are privileged today to have, you saw them in the video, we have live with us all the way from Washington State, Heather Tinninga and TV. So we are so privileged to have them. And before I let them kind of share about the model, you're going to hear a little bit about SAFE in the next few minutes. I wanted to give them each just a couple minutes to introduce themselves so you kind of know who you're talking to. And so I'll begin with Heather. But Heather, as kind of the founder and the architect of this model and this initiative, in a couple minutes, could you just introduce yourself to the group? Thanks for being with us.
Awesome. Thanks, Kyle. Hey, thanks y'all for coming today. It's just such an honor to be on a call full of people who are leaning into the fight against human trafficking. It matters. And like I said in the end of that video, like We can all be sparks and ignite into a flame, and hopefully this can change everything. So thanks for leaning into that. My journey around the whole trafficking issue started in 2004. I was working at the Gates Foundation, and we were headed to India to try and stem the spread of HIV there. And what we learned before we hit the ground there is that the folks in India that were spreading HIV the most were the sex workers and the truckers. So on my itinerary for this trip was meetings with sex workers every day. I had never met sex workers before, so I needed to learn some things before I went. So I watched some documentaries and learned some things and read some articles and headed over there. And on that trip, we met with sex workers every day in brothels, in rural communities, in health clinics, and on the streets of Kamatipura, which at that time was the largest red light district in the world, right in the middle of the bustling metropolis of Mumbai, India. And each day, as we were meeting with these women, my paradigms about sex workers were getting shattered. I was discovering some of the most beautiful, dignified women I'd ever met in my life. They weren't whores. They weren't prostitutes. They were slaves, paying off debts to brothel owners after getting duped or drugged into the sex trade. And they were children, and they were sisters, and they were mothers who were selling their bodies to feed their kids because they didn't have other options. So that trip changed me forever. It just got under my skin, and I think God wanted it there. But like many of us, I was still naive in thinking that trafficking was only happening over there in India and Cambodia and Thailand until 2009. And that's when I learned that trafficking was happening right here in my upscale Seattle suburb, in hotels and massage parlor brothels and high-end apartments. And that it was primarily American girls being exploited, that were forced or frauded or coerced into having sex with 10 to 15 men a day and not getting to keep any of the money. Before then, I guess I figured that women who did sex work were doing it voluntarily, right? We see prostitution in movies and you kind of think that's their choice. But it turns out over 91% of the victims want out of the sex trade. And about half of them attempt suicide to get there. Doesn't sound voluntary to me anymore. So as I learned more about the domestic side of the issue, and my devastation just grew and grew and grew as I realized we have sex slaves in America. Just like the women I met in India, there were women being sex slaves in America. So we got some smart folks together to figure out next steps because we were brokenhearted about it. And we surveyed the landscape. We learned there were great nonprofits doing great work in our region, yet the movement was super fragmented. And the orgs were competing with each other. Many of them were just starting, so they're trying to raise money and get board members. And we wanted to see these organizations working together as part of a movement, just getting after the problem as a whole, not in each of their own silos. And I'll tell you, the reason that we were so focused on being a movement minded is that the folks on the dark side of this issue are very well coordinated. From the pimps to the traffickers to the recruiters, pornography sellers, bellhops, bartenders, madams, cab drivers, the whole group, they know each other. And the criminal network behind this whole thing is really vast and well organized. So that we knew we needed to be the same. If we're going to win this fight, we had to be well organized. So we want to be a movement and be organized. And so we decided we needed an alliance that included the business community, justice system, police force, churches, individuals, and the nonprofits working on the front lines every day. An alliance of people that would link arms and say no more. Not in my community is it okay for people to be exploited. And then as business minds that came to the table, we knew we needed to execute a strategy because that's how we think about everything. Got to have a strategy that was collaborative and effective and movement focused so we could fight this evil. And that's when SAFE was born. Strategic Alliance to Fight Exploitation. So I'll stop there and let Steve share a little.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Heather. You know, when we hear about this, it's never easy or comfortable for anyone. And yet I'm so thankful that even in that discomfort, you responded the way you did. And I think it's cool to see how you married your expertise with that passion and that heart response. So thanks for being with us. Steve, I want to turn it over to you. We heard a little bit of the introduction in the video, but just put a little more meat on the bone, if you will. Why did you engage with this?
Thank you, Kyle. Yeah, you know, what I've learned over the years working on this movement is that everybody has their own story when they first heard that this is happening on their own streets. My story is similar. I heard about my wife invited someone that she was working with that was doing camps in India for sex slaves, and she came to our house, and I had a bunch of people invited over, and we thought we were going to hear about funding some camps in India, and it turns out she stops and says, "Hey, this is happening right downtown, right in your own streets." And after that initial shock happens, then you begin to have your mind work, thinking about, well, I have a daughter. I have two daughters, actually. I've got granddaughters, and what happens if they were trafficked? And then your heart begins to blow up, thinking about what are you going to do if that would happen? And what I've learned, and what's part of my story, is that people have a couple of reactions when they hear. Some people want to pretend like they never heard about it. They want to bury their head in the sand. And there's others that just can't deal with it and have to get involved. And that's kind of what I took from Greg Snyder's introduction on the invite. It really hit me. He said, well, maybe, just maybe, someone on this call, maybe, just maybe Steve Esau can make a difference. Maybe I can help somebody. And that's kind of my story. It's something that I can't forget. It's something that I have to do something with. And with SAFE, and what you guys are doing in Florida is exactly what it's going to take. Is there are men and women that say, I'm not going to bury my head in the sand. I'm going to get involved. Use me. So that's my story, Kyle. We'll meet the bones.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Obviously, again, same type of reaction. It's never easy or comfortable. Thankful that you jumped in the way you did. So I want to hear from the two of you in just a few minutes. Talk to us about the model a little bit. What's the secret sauce, if you will? We've had the privilege as a core team, the Lanes and the Snyders and myself, to know a little bit about SAFE. But for those who are just hearing about this for the first time, what makes this work? What makes this alliance so unique and so effective? I'll start with you, Heather, if you would.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. I would say there's several, just like any recipe, there's several ingredients, but then there's always the secret sauce, right? It's the secret thing. It's the thing that, if I told you I'd have to kill you, and no, I can't give you the recipe. This is why it's so good. So, but we're going to reveal it today. What's the secret sauce? Some of the ingredients, some of the secret sauce. So one of the pieces is, as I said in the video, one of the critical things we decided when we started SAFE was we didn't need another nonprofit that would compete with the current ones. We didn't need them thinking, oh, it's another org that's going to raise money and compete with us. And what the movement really needed was a funding mechanism for the most critical work happening, to figure out what the most critical things were for the movement and then fund those things. So we opened a donor advised fund at National Christian Foundation. And you saw the hourglass thing in the video. That's the best way I can think to describe it. So you think of it like that. So people contribute to the SAFE fund at NCF. They get their tax donation, and then the SAFE Advisory Board follows this expert-informed strategy, and we get the funds out to organizations that are doing work that's moving the needle on the issue. So it's kind of a hybrid, an effective hybrid between a nonprofit that raises money, but for a cause, not a specific org, and then a grant-making foundation that disperses the funds to the best organizations who are doing the best work. And in that process, before we disperse the funds, we as a SAFE Advisory Board built a ton of rigor into the process for vetting organizations and projects. So our donors feel super confident that when they give to SAFE, they know their money is going to go to the whole movement, not one thing, prevention, intervention, restoration, the whole thing. And they know that we have vetted these orgs and vetted the projects, and we know the most critical needs. And so they feel really confident about where their money is going to fight human trafficking. The last thing I'll say about starting a fund versus having a full-fledged nonprofit is that we have super low administrative costs. SAFE is a lean, mean operating machine because NCF does all the back office work for us because we're just under their umbrella, which is great. So we don't have to file nonprofit tax returns and pay salaries and benefits and have overhead and all that stuff. So we have tried to figure out a name for SAFE of like, what is it? It's an alliance, it's a trafficking thing. We instead are calling it a lean, mean movement funding machine.
I love it. I love it.
Steve's got some more stuff.
Yeah. Steve, what would you want to add to that?
Well, first of all, just to be real, it takes a Heather as well. It takes someone like that. It takes the Lanes and the Cousins and the Greg Snyders of the world. It takes people like you that care, right? That's the first thing. But you know, I'm a business owner, and it takes you don't invest in a new business without a business plan. No one ever would. You don't go off that way. And when I learned of the issue, my heart was all blown up, and I'm trying to figure out what I can do. So I'm going to different fundraisers and seeing all the fracture in the movement. And so when SAFE kind of starts talking about why doesn't the nonprofits collaborate together? Why doesn't the police department collaborate with them? Why do we need to start another nonprofit and spend all this money on it? And the answer was we didn't have to. What we need is a bunch of concerned men and women from the business community that will invest in this kind of movement. And it's going to take that there's not agendas. With the SAFE model, it isn't about funding any one particular nonprofit. It's about funding the movement. And I think that that's a really large part of the secret sauce, is that when Heather convened our very first SAFE advisory board meeting, she says, folks, drop your agendas at the door. This is about the girls and the boys on the streets, and we're gonna work on this together. So you guys come together and create a strategy that we will in turn fund. So I think that's kind of the juice behind the whole secret sauce, Kyle, is that we're in this together for the movement, not for anybody's agenda. It's about the girls. Period.
Yeah, thank you. And I think one of the best pieces of feedback is personally hearing from nonprofit leaders, and just this reminder that the competition thing goes out the window because collaboration is so prioritized. And so we not only preach about this, or brag about this no organization kind of thing, not just because it's fiscally smart and it works, but because it acknowledges the truth, which is that there are so many great groups doing work in the fight already. I love that SAFE comes along as a leveraging, as Heather said, a movement funding machine. So Heather, to that point, would you speak a little bit more, share with the group kind of the strategy? We've talked about this phased strategy to SAFE. Can you put a little bit more on that idea of what it means to have a phased strategy?
Sure. So what we did in the beginning is when we got all the experts together. So these are the nonprofit leaders that are on the front lines every day. We knew as business people, like they know way more than we do about this stuff, so we should listen to them. So we got them together. And as Steve said, the message was drop your agendas at the door, come on in, take off your org hat, put on your movement hat as best you can. And we're going to talk about what the most critical needs of the movement are. And I'll tell you guys, I'll never forget that day. The first time we did it, we were in a conference room with the Seattle Police Department, and because they were on our advisory board and involved as well. And so we had a meeting at their thing, and we just said, what does the movement need? That's the question we're going to answer. And so it got hot in there, and we whiteboarded, and everybody had all these opinions, but at the end of the day, they all agreed on what the movement needed, which felt like a miracle because these are orgs that had not agreed previously and not really come together and wanted to collaborate. So that felt like a miracle. And that was our phase one strategy. What they said the movement needed, we said, okay, if that's what the experts say, we say yes. We'll then put a strategy on it and raise the money and get it done. And we did that. And we raised money, and then we celebrated, which was awesome. That's part of this little cycle, is a celebration. At the end of each phase, we had to celebrate what's happened, right? A bunch of victims got out of the life in that first phase because of what we did. Awesome, celebrate. And then we got the experts together again. Same question, take off your org hat, put on your movement hat. What does the movement need now? It's 2 years later when we start our phase two strategy. Movement's changing all the time, right? New issues are coming up, different things are happening. And so we whiteboarded the whole thing. The second phase two strategy had 8 different things in it, in prevention, intervention, and restoration. And we got after those things. We listened to the experts and say, what you say is what the movement needs, we'll do that. Raise the money, funded the thing, celebrated, then did phase 3, then did phase 4. So one of the greatest things about having this phased strategy and doing it kind of a chunk at a time is that we always stay current with what the movement needs. We don't ever get way behind because we've listened and we do that chunk, and then we listen again and do that chunk. So I'll give you an example. When we started almost 6 years ago, there were a lot of victims in the sex trade out here in Washington State. And so our phase one strategy, when we had that hot meeting in the Seattle PD conference room, was solely focused on intervention, because all of the experts agreed we needed more beds to get girls and women out of the life of prostitution, because we had very few out here. And so that's what everyone agreed on. So we said, okay, phase one strategy, one thing, more beds. And we funded that, SAFE funded that. So we had this receiving center get opened earlier and have their first year of operating funded, because we got after that with them. And by the grace of God, many of those victims got out of life. And over the past several years, many victims have gotten out of life because of that first thing we funded. And those victims are now survivors, which is amazing. And we didn't really need survivor services in phase one, right? The critical need was to get more victims out. We needed beds to get victims out of the life. But now, several phases later, we have a bunch more survivors, which is awesome. We'd rather have survivors than victims, but survivors need different things. They need jobs and they need longer term housing and things like that. And so in phase three and phase four, we've been funding those kinds of things because that's what the movement needs now. So we do a strategy, figure out what the movement needs, and then keep assessing what does the movement need, and we can stay current on that. And it's been beautiful to see SAFE grow and change and flex to whatever the experts say we're supposed to do. And I know you guys can do the same thing in Central Florida. So I'm excited about what your phase strategies will be.
That's awesome. Thanks, Heather. I love that about SAFE, that as deliberate as you all are in this process and kind of attacking the fight or attacking the problem, there is this ever-growing desire to listen. And there's a flexibility and an elasticity to SAFE that is so unique that it's not bogged down by its own agenda. And you're just trying to join the great work that's already happening. That's awesome. So answer us this, because I think the question's in all of our minds. Y'all have been doing this. I asked you recently, we're coming up on 6 years of SAFE in Washington, which is incredible. Share with us, if you will, a little bit, each of you. Have you seen the needle move? I think that's the big question is, okay, the model sounds great. I think it can work. Have you seen impact?
Steve.
Okay. Yes, Kyle, it's a great question. And you know, for me, one of the biggest needle movers that I could say about the last 6 years has been the collaboration of the police, the judicial system, and the nonprofits working together. I think that if there would be one thing that you would really want to see, would be that there's a unification of the movement, that people are actually working together and not saying this is the way I would do it or this is the way I would do it. They're agreeing. And again, this is not Steve Esau's model. This is not Greg Snyder or Heather. This is the experts, the frontline on the street workers coming together to work together under the SAFE model. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. We could use a lot more of that in a lot of different areas in this country, right? But more some concrete things was that the first phase was the emergency receiving center, and we all cried the day that opened because it was such a big deal. The whole movement said the one thing lacking is that, and that was a beautiful agreed upon initiative that the business community came around and said, okay, I'm in, and we got that funded, and that is a really, really big deal. So that it was never about the SAFE agenda, meaning us founders. It was about the movement and the experts. There was a group of Microsoft guys that heard about the issue, and they worked with one of our nonprofits to create a robot phone system that when people would go to buy sex online or by phone, this chatbot would talk back to them to actually tell them and play along for a while until finally the chatbot would say, hey, you know what, your information, Seattle PD, this probably isn't a good thing for you to be doing. Now that was a big thing we funded the second year, and that ended up becoming a licensed model across the country that's being used in a lot of different jurisdictions. And that was something that SAFE was able to do because we could be lean and mean. So moving the needle, there's been 10,000 beds nights spent at the emergency receiving center, and thousands upon thousands of people are being having sex being interrupted by the chatbots. So it's a big deal.
Wow. That's amazing.
It's cool.
Heather,
Can I
anything you
share
want
a
to
few
add
more?
there?
Yeah, thanks. We've also, thousands of kids have been reached with prevention curriculum so that they never get caught up in this life. Because we know if, like, it'll be hard to measure those outcomes and whether those kids ever, end up buying sex or selling sex. But we all know an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so we've invested there. As Steve said, 10,000 nights of rest have been provided at that emergency receiving center. And I'll tell you, the stories coming out of that place, like, they make me weep. It is beauty from ashes every day. Victims that wouldn't trust anyone, but said, okay, I'll come. And they stay. A lot of times victims run from places, but at this place they've stayed, and they get hope and they get love and they get healing and they go on to better places. They're becoming survivors. Demand is going down in Seattle, and we've had a university keep studying the number of people purchasing sex every day, and that number is going down. It's really cool to see, like, there are actually less sex transactions happening in the greater Seattle area. That's where it's getting measured for now. Steve talked about the chatbot technology. It's such cool stuff. I didn't even know what that was before we started, and it's really cool artificial intelligence kind of stuff. 17,000 sex purchases were interrupted in 1 year because of the chatbot technology. Artificial intelligence responding to a buyer that's coming saying, they post fake sex ads, and then the buyer texts in and says, hey, I want to buy sex from you. And then the chatbot responds, and then they get that note from Seattle PD or the FBI that says, you've just agreed to have sex with a minor. We're on to you, dude. So that's been really amazing. It continues to disrupt sex purchases. And it's happening across the country now because they're licensing it. The last thing I'll say is that, two last things. Many employers across the state have been trained. So we've funded training for hotels and lots of employers that might see this kind of thing to spot and respond to trafficking. And victims are getting helped in lobbies of hotels, because right before the sex transaction ever happens, the stories are incredible, actually, because the front desk staff got trained and they know what to look for, and they're seeing it, they're spotting it and stopping things before they happen, calling law enforcement and getting a response. And then one of the coolest things that's happening is this, as we have more survivors who need jobs, two of our orgs came together and said, we're going to partner. We said, good, we like unity. They said, we're going to partner. One org works with survivors and they're training survivors to be ready for jobs. Another org works with employers and they're training employers on how to hire someone who's had severe trauma. And there are 17 employers in our state right now who have gotten trained and who are raising their hand and saying, I want to hire survivors. No one says you're welcome here to people who have been in prostitution. No one does that. But 17 employers are now doing that and are guaranteeing that if you're a survivor of sex trafficking, I'll give you an interview at my company. One of them is UPS, the parcel delivery service. Like, it's incredible what's happening. And SAFE has had the pleasure of raising funds for each of these things and all the strategies, contributing almost $1 million to this work across Washington State. And we're just grateful to be part of the needle moving. More victims are getting out, more survivors are getting on to healthy lives, demand's going down, and we know you guys can do the same in Central Florida. So we're excited to see what your victories are, and we will be cheering along with you.
Thank you. Well, thank you both for sharing. I mean, even to that point of impact, it's so encouraging because, as we've already acknowledged in this fight, the traffickers are organized, and the problem is so multifaceted that for anyone getting introduced to this for the first time, it can feel overwhelming. You can look at this and just say, where would you even begin? And yet it's so encouraging. I hope it's encouraging everyone on this call to hear that the SAFE model and how you all have been deliberate at attacking this has produced fruit, and it has produced tangible impact. Is really incredible. So I think we could all listen to you two for the next hour or two. I want to thank you so much for your time and your sharing with us. But I don't want to rob the audience of getting to meet our three local champions. And so I'm honored to introduce you to Daryl and Karen Lane, as well as Greg Snyder, and the three champions who I've had the privilege of working with over the last year as we've figured out how to, obviously with Heather and Steve's help, and with the help of the NCF team, figure out how to land this, what's worked so well in Washington, to land it in Central Florida. So you're going to get to meet each of them over the next few minutes. But Greg, I'm going to start with you. Would you be willing to share with the group obviously a little bit of your own experience, but share with us a little bit about the SAFE model and what it might be looking like here in Central Florida.
Sure, Kyle, thanks. And Steve and Heather, thanks for being just so dedicated to SAFE and the hours and weeks and years you put into it and giving us a model that it really does work. And it's exciting. And I thank everybody that's joined in, 100 plus people signed in, that you're spending a Tuesday evening with us because you know that this is important. And this is hard stuff, but it is important and you can make a difference. But I got involved because rarely do I find a cause or opportunity that excites the business side of me, the Steve side of me, and yet also stirs my heart desire to solve injustice problems, especially women and children. That's a unique combination, and the SAFE Alliance, as you've heard, just really does that and does it well. And Steve and Heather and the SAFE Washington folks have discovered a special sauce, and they shared it with us, which is super neat. Because they figured out how do you take, diverse groups that are working separate little pies and bring them together for a unifying cause and do it in a way that moves the needle and figures out those strategic gaps and then moves forward with that. And the sauce, as I appreciate it as a businessman, it's not complicated. There's not many ingredients in this. Really, it happens in business every day. You take your weaknesses and you look at somebody else's strengths and you form a partnership, an alliance. It happens thousands of times a day in U.S. businesses. We just haven't applied it in something like this, at least here in Central Florida. That had excited me, but what was equally exciting and frightening at the same time is that I, as a person that had zero expertise at trafficking problems in Central Florida, can make a difference here in Central Florida. The alliance model where we bring in experts and they educate us and we do what we do, maybe in terms of networking and bringing in money, they educate us in terms of how can they be more effective? So that I, a beginner to this fight, but I know I have to get involved, I can make a difference. So what in our couple of months here, we've started this alliance. What have I learned here in Central Florida? I've learned that there are wonderful dedicated groups we call the frontline partners, which you've been introduced to the title. But many here as well as in Washington are under-resourced and underfunded. And though movement-minded, they're usually only able to focus on one or two aspects of the fight because that's what they do well. That's their mission, that's their secret sauce, that's their passion. But rarely do they get together to talk about the movement and the problems overall. They don't get to collaborate with their peers and help build a strategic plan for eliminating sex trafficking here in Central Florida. That is cool. I've also discovered that we have equally dedicated and skilled law enforcement teams here. And they do work together somewhat. They can do work together better, but there's good collaboration in some cases. And they have the support of their sheriffs, some of which are on the call today, and their directors. And more importantly, or equally importantly, they have the support of the lawmakers in Tallahassee at the state level. But they're focused on intervention. That's their skill set. That's their sweet spot. So they have to depend on other groups for the education, the preservation, the restoration of victims, and that have skills in those areas. And I've also learned that there are individuals, businesses, and faith-based organizations here in the Orlando area that want to engage with their resources but don't know where to start. How to invest in projects, what organizations will move the needle in a meaningful way. The SAFE model does all that. Brings unique solutions to capitalize on the strengths of each group, fills in critical gaps that individually no group can do. And I love it because it takes those frontline partners that are focused and have experience in fighting, know the cause really well, and merges them with new champions. And that's the key for us here in Central Florida, is finding new champions that want to get involved. Ones are not already engaged and they want to make an impact. And for the frontline partners, we too feel it's very important to create space for additional collaboration and community. We're in the process of building our advisory council, and they're going to put together and help develop this phase one strategy for us here as well. And then they will bring us to the executive team to fund. And lo and behold, phase one will be up and running first quarter of next year. For the champions, our community partners will provide space for collaboration as well, and raising community awareness, providing education, creating opportunities to engage in a way that, thanks to the National Christian Foundation and some passionate initial investors, every dollar that you donate will go to the front lines. Every dollar. So why am I convinced this is a special sauce that works here in Central Florida? I mean, it works in Washington, it should work here, but I've seen glimpses of just how wonderful this can be here in the Orlando area. A couple of weeks ago, I was given a chance to share with a community church here, not my church, but a neat one that's just around the corner from me. And they asked about, can you talk about how prevalent human trafficking is here in Central Florida, and how the Safe Alliance can use local experts, the model, how it works. How do we tap into resources here in Central Florida? I explained how the model worked, how they could trust the advisors, how we would vet organizations, and their response was immediate and enthusiastic and uplifting. It's like, oh my gosh, we've been praying about this. We're all in. It was so cool to hear them. Likewise, when we shared the model in our plans with city government and county government, we had a similar reaction. You may have seen a quote from Mayor Demings, who did a press release with us about the power of the Safe Alliance in our community. But what you didn't see was the reaction of the staff as they asked questions and learned more about Safe. So, wow, this is different. This is special. And the bottom line we've talked to, whether it's the city, whether it's the churches, whether it's individuals, whether it's to frontline partners, is everyone is exciting. Actually, they actually say it's very exciting. So I too am excited. The Safe Alliance, with your help, we really can make a difference. We can and we will mobilize this community to come alongside those frontline partners doing great work and the victims they help rescue each and every day, and eradicate this horrible injustice to the most vulnerable of Central Florida. So that's why I'm excited. That's why I love the model. And that's why I think we can make a difference.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you for sharing. I hope y'all didn't miss a little bit of his enthusiasm, or why I love having him on these calls. But I will tell you that, like Steve, and I haven't had the privilege of being on every week with Steve, but I have with Greg. Greg is an example of someone who came to the table, and he mentioned this earlier. A guy who comes to the table, an expert in his own field, a lot of skills and a lot of tools to leverage, and yet approached this with passion and humility to say, I have the passion, I have relationships to leverage, but I don't know what I'm doing in this. Let's figure this out together. And so it's been a distinct privilege working with you, Greg, and I'm thankful for what you brought to the table. I want to introduce to you the other special members of our team. We're going to actually save the best for last. So Karen, we're gonna talk with you last. But I want to introduce Daryl Lane. And Daryl, would you just share with the group a little bit of, Heather talks about the spark that lights this thing. What was the spark for you personally? And if you'd share a little bit about the local initiative with SAFE in Central Florida.
Thanks, Kyle. I appreciate it. And thank you to all of you for being here with us this afternoon. But I know all of you have heard the saying, when one door closes, another one opens. Sometimes, though, there are doors that are just open. I think for me, this started about 20 years ago. I was introduced to someone who prosecuted human trafficking cases at one point in their career. I would hear stories of victims being rescued and the effect that this crime had on people. I was horrified by what I heard, but I was glad to hear that there were people working to stop this crime. Looking back now, that was when the door started to open. I spent 20 years working in a large healthcare system here in Central Florida. I loved my job as a software engineer. I got to make computers do whatever I wanted them to do. I had the pleasure of designing and building computer systems that helped the doctors and nurses deliver care to patients faster and with more timely data. Sometimes the work was hard. taking months and sometimes years to develop the solutions. We did it all for one thing, though: better outcomes for patients. It was extremely rewarding work. I realized that our successful projects happened because of three reasons. It took each person realizing there was a problem to solve and they didn't have all the answers. It took people coming together to share their expertise, clinicians sharing with the computer guys their successes and challenges, those things that worked and where things needed to change. The computer guys learning what it was like to work with patients, seeing patients through the eyes of the caregivers, not just the computer's perspective. Everybody working together, the executives, the doctors, the nurses, and the computer guys, to build workflows, processes, and systems to improve the healthcare and the quality of the individuals in the communities we served. It took each person committed to the successful outcome. This is how we approached every project we worked on. As a team, we made a difference. So let's fast forward to 2018, when both Karen and I retired. Our goals in retirement included traveling to the places in our bucket list, giving back to the community with time and our finances, but really, we just wanted to make a difference. It was in April or May of last year when we were invited to Impact 2019 conference held at the Ritz-Carlton in Orlando. They said, the place where generous givers will unite this October to explore solutions and accelerate change. And you'll gain actionable insights from local and global giving trailblazers and top generosity leaders. That would be Heather and Steve. We thought, if nothing else, it's the Ritz. It'll be a nice weekend. Other than generosity, we had no idea what the conference was about, nor did we anticipate how it would change our lives. Heather was one of the special guests and speakers at that conference. And much like today, she spoke about human trafficking and SAFE in Washington, how through this model, they were making a difference, moving the needle in the fight. I knew immediately that the SAFE model could work because I'd seen this pattern work during my career at the hospital. By the end of the conference, that door was open all the way. We knew we had to do something. The three of us were inspired to start SAFE in Central Florida. So we stepped through that door. We believe in the experience, knowledge, and the effort of the frontline partners. We believe in the hard work and dedication of the law enforcement people. And we believe in the care and generosity of our friends and neighbors here in Central Florida. The door is wide open, and we hope you will join us.
Thanks, Daryl. Yeah, and it's continually inspiring when I get on the phone with you guys each week, and I'm reminded of how you heard that story, and like Heather and Steve, you responded. So we understand that each individual, our hearts burn for different passions, but I love that when the signal went off for you guys on this cause, you jumped in with both feet, and it's not just admirable; it's inspiring to the rest of us. So I'm thankful for that. Well, I want to introduce your better half, as you say, to the audience, Karen Lane. Karen, would you obviously you were at the conference with Daryl, a lot of that story is shared, but could you tie in for the group a little bit? We've talked the last couple of weeks about some of the statistics understanding the reality of this problem in Central Florida. That it's not just, we're not just wanting to replicate this to replicate it. There's a reason. And then maybe share a little bit of the personal impact for you as well.
Okay. Thank you, Kyle. I appreciate that. Well, sometimes it's easier to declare it isn't happening here, at least not in my backyard. Sometimes it's just easier to focus on ourselves, our families, our jobs, our issues. And sometimes it's easier to take the path of least resistance. But sometimes we are faced with something like human trafficking. And there's a quote from William Wilberforce that says, "You may choose to look the other way, but you can never say again that you didn't know." We know now, and we are choosing not to look the other way and choosing to get involved and do what we can. So we decided to institute SAFE in Central Florida after the life-changing conference that Daryl told you about. We then went about meeting with nonprofits. We did research. We went to conferences to learn more about the world of human trafficking. And the more we learned, the more heartbroken we became. Most of what we thought we knew about trafficking was wrong. It is not just in other countries. It is rampant here in the US and in Florida and in our counties where we live. It is not just undocumented foreign nationals that are victimized, but primarily US citizens. It's our sisters, our daughters, our granddaughters, our grandsons. The perpetrators, the predators, they're not from around the world. They're mostly US citizens too. Often those involved in prostitution and pornography are not there of their own free will, as Heather also mentioned. Runaways from around the country are being approached by traffickers within 48 hours of leaving their homes or their foster homes. Now, sometimes it is true that survivors are physically forced into trafficking and physically controlled, but the reality is most traffickers use various forms of manipulation to lure their victims and then control them. For example, promises of employment, like a modeling job, promises of stable housing, promises of security, even romantic associations are used. And once involved, victims stay with traffickers for a number of reasons. They may lack the basic necessities to physically get out, like transportation or a safe place to go, access to money, or even access to their own identification. They may also be afraid for their physical safety. And tragically, some do not recognize that they have any other options but to stay. And the most disturbing fact of all is that most victims are not trafficked by strangers, but by someone they know and trust. From romantic partners, including spouses, to friends, to siblings, and yes, even parents. The more we learned, our respect for those organizations that work in this fight have grown tremendously. For those of you on this call already at work in the fight, we thank you for your dedication, your commitment, and your perseverance. We want to come alongside of you to provide encouragement, support, and resources. For Heather and Steve, we thank you for paving the way with an effective method to focus on collaboration, listen to the experts, and then multiply those efforts among the frontline organizations. For the churches and other organizations that are getting involved, we thank you for seeing the need and growing our community to join in this fight. And for those of you who are new to this conversation, we need you. No one can do everything, but everyone can do something. This is a community-wide problem and it needs a community-wide solution. Together, we can unite as a community, joining forces in the fight. With the right tool, the SAFE model, we can maximize and leverage the impact of those in the fray. And now, we need to do something now and declare that every woman, child, and man deserves a chance. Together, right now, we can mobilize resources to end human trafficking in Central Florida.
Thanks, Karen. Thank you. Well, I know everyone on the call can see the passion. It's the case with all 5 of these champions on the call today. My hope is that you're experiencing some of that yourself as well. Before we close, I'm going to have Greg in just a minute share with you some of the ways you can get involved. For those of you that are feeling challenged, inspired, led to do something and to acknowledge what Karen just said, that one person can't do everything. I love that, what you said there, but everyone can do something. Greg's going to share with you a few options for getting involved. But before we do that, I wanted to just share, we had a larger team than just the four of us locally that you see, who really played key roles in helping us build this initiative the last year, and wanted you to hear from just a few more of them. So enjoy this short video meeting a few more of our launch team members, and then we'll close out with Greg and let you all go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dee Coleman, and I am the Executive Director of Samaritan Village. I'm really excited about what Safe in Central Florida is doing and has a vision for. I believe that they have come right on time. And I believe that if you're watching this video today, it's because you are ready to take up action. Whether you're a pastor and a church leader, a business, or just somebody who wants to advocate on behalf of the oppressed. And I believe that SAFE is offering each and every one of us an opportunity to do so. And I believe that with SAFE's vision, that we'll be able to look at our connectivity as a community, that they're going to provide a conduit for us to see the gaps that exist within our region and for survivors, and then we can all collectively work towards filling those gaps. And so I'm excited for our community to come together and join together, to be unified, and really to work towards ending this issue of human trafficking here in Central Florida.
Hello, I'm Ellen Arnold, and I serve on the Board of Directors of Samaritan Village. We're an organization that takes in women who've been sex trafficked. And I learned about this horrendous crime 21 years ago, and I've been involved in the fight ever since. And I was thrilled to meet Karen and Daryl Lane and Greg Snyder and to see their passion grow as they founded SAFE in Central Florida. Their mission to empower the organizations in this fight is so encouraging, and I see the Army to bring justice in this issue getting more and more powerful, and that's a good thing.
My name is Diane Checchio. As a former human trafficking prosecutor in Central Florida, I've seen firsthand the devastation this horrific crime leaves in its wake. I know it can be difficult to believe, but human trafficking is happening right here in our communities to victims of all ages. This crime doesn't have ethnic, gender, or socioeconomic boundaries. That is why I am so excited to be a part of SAFE of Central Florida. One person or one organization or one law enforcement agency working alone will not eradicate this crime. But together, we can have such a meaningful impact in the community and in the lives of human trafficking victims. It really does take a village. I hope you will join me in the fight.
As part of the team here at NCF Orlando, I have been so encouraged to think about the individuals who were captured by an idea, a spark, and then they took action to turn that spark into a flame. I believe that flame is going to fuel the movement to end the tragedy of sexual exploitation in our city and our community. It's been an honor and a privilege for NCF and our work here to facilitate, encourage, and equip the team at SAFE in Central Florida. And I am expectant for big things to change in our city and in our community to bring hope and light to people who are trapped in some of the darkest places in our society. I am praying for you and I am with you. May God bless you and keep you.
Hi, my name is Tomas Lars. I'm the founder and president of United Abolitionists, an organization based right here in Central Florida. Since 2004, I've been in the fight against human trafficking. And over the years, I've seen many organizations come and go. That's why I'm so excited for SAFE of Central Florida to be here as a clearinghouse and as a support to the anti-trafficking movement. Together, we will make a difference. Come and join the team.
So as you can tell, we've had no shortage of talented and passionate people willing to join us in this work. And I'm excited to see what's going to happen these next few years as we kind of try and copy what Steve and Heather have done in Washington and see it happen here in Central Florida. So before we close, because we can't leave without giving you an opportunity to join us and to live into what we've shared with you, I'm going to have Greg Snyder kind of close us out with, Greg, what are just a few of the options they have to get involved for those who feel motivated to join us?
Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, there's no lack of passion in this group here. It's way cool. And it's neat that we can find purpose in this. And Karen, Darrell, and I are recently retired, and it's neat that we have the opportunity to find purpose in not something we do day in and day out in like a regular job or something we buy. We find purpose now in something that we're helping someone, we're helping people, we're helping children and women and men that desperately need our help. And that is so neat to come alongside people that can help us do that, and we can help them do that. There are three ways that you too can kind of join the team here. You can serve, you can share, and you can give. You can serve if you're, you can be a frontline partner with us. If you're a nonprofit or government agency that's fighting sex trafficking in some way, we'd love to have you join us. And it's neat that although we're officially launching today, we have nearly 30 organizations that have been captivated already by the SAFE model in just kind of informal discussions and are already in the alliance that we're in. That's amazing. They want to leverage resources, and we have people that want to leverage, that have resources and want to leverage them, and we want to pull them together as individual champions, or if you represent a business or a faith-based organization or a foundation, join as a community partner. And together we can figure out the gaps in coverage, the strategic things we need to do as a team, and then we'll figure out how to fund them in our phase strategy. And joining is easy as jumping on our website, or we'll put a link here in the chat section or later on the web and in our website, just where it says join here. Pretty straightforward. You can also help by inviting others to join the fight. Become educated in the size of the problem. I mean, Orlando is the third worst city in the United States per capita for sex trafficking. Oh my gosh, that is horrible. We need to know that. We need to get that word out. If you need to know, and you need to share what the signs of human trafficking are and what to do about it, so that we can reduce the number of transactions of these awful things that are happening to our children, essentially, in our town. Finally, you can help by investing. You can invest time and human resources to come alongside our frontline partners. In the story I shared with you earlier about the church that said, we're all in, they've already connected with one of the ministries that has joined the alliance, and they're talking about helping furnish and get ready a new facility for victims. So it's neat how the connections happen already, and we're launching today. It's awesome. But since this is a dark and often dangerous crime, for most of us, the best way to invest is through our financial resources, to be honest with you. And this is how it works, and Heather explained this well. You make a donation to a dedicated fund for SAFE to the National Christian Foundation via a link you'll see in the chat area and or on our website. And not only is this a great year tax-wise to make a donation, but since we have generous donors that have covered the administrative costs for not only 2020, but 2021, every tax dollar you donate now will be invested with frontline partners in strategic projects. And that is such a neat thing to see, people supporting us so early in our life cycle here. But just to give you an idea of what kind of impact your donation can make, $100 can sponsor a prevention program for 25 at-risk youth. We talked about prevention, that's important. $500 can sponsor a customized training program for first responders. $1,000 can cover the cost of medical and dental prescriptions for nearly a year at a survival's residential facility. $10,000 supports over 2 months of hotline expenses. And $25,000 can cover the therapeutic expenses for nearly a year at a survivor's residential facility here in the Orlando area. And these are just one of many, many, many things that the team, the advisory team, will look at and see, how do we move the needle? What's the most important things? What's it cost? And then we need to fund it. And like any organization that depends on donations, we welcome not only one-time gifts, but recurring monthly or quarterly gifts, if that's how you like to give, to invest in the fight. And we encourage you to invest now, so when that first strategic project is identified, we can go fast and solve these problems and and protect and rescue these women and these children. But if you're not an early adapter or an investor, we'd ask you to get ready. Get ready for next year. Put money in your budget for 2021 for that first SAFE project. And if you can share with us, if you're willing to share with us your plans, and we can build those preliminary commitments into our funding strategies. But let me tell you, independent of how much or when you decide to join the team and contribute, your gift matters and you can make a difference. Today, you've mostly heard about the business side of me. I'm an engineer, I'm a business guy, and that's probably easiest for me to talk to about. But every time I watch that first video you watched with Heather and Steve, it kind of tugs on my heart. But not as much as when I talk to our new partners that are actually in the field doing the work here in our community, in South Orlando, East Orlando, North Orlando, West Orlando, in the surrounding counties. It's here, it's all around us. And when I see what these people are doing about what kind of evil they're trying to prevent here, what pain they're trying to eliminate here, how they're trying to help victims here and restore their lives here, it makes me, I just have to get involved, and I hope you do as well. You see, and Karen touched on this as well, I did not see the evil in my community. I was looking too far away. I did not see the darkness that was here. But now I know, now I see, now I too have to do something about this. And I know, talking to our partners, that their needs outstrip their resources. And that's something we can help with. You and I can be, or equip someone to be, a victim's hope, their rescuer from slavery, their answer to prayer. So we ask you to consider this launch event to be your call to action, your opportunity to make a difference in preventing or rescuing or helping victims recover. Please join what I call an ordinary bunch of people here, poised to do extraordinary things in our quest to eradicate trafficking here in Central Florida. Please get involved. We need you. Thanks.
Amen. Thank you, Greg. Well, that brings our time to a close. Obviously, we're a couple minutes over 5:30, but thankful that you hung with us on this because it's a big deal, obviously. I want to thank Heather Tinninga and Steve Esau for making the time all the way from across the country to be with us and share some of their story. Thank you, Daryl and Karen and Greg, for the work you continue to do. And we're thankful to NCF and NCF Orlando for hosting this and helping make it happen. But for those of you on the call, please visit the website. If you have any questions, there's also a link there to send us an email. I already had a few chat items sent to me personally with some questions about the Alliance. Please don't hesitate to ask us questions. And as we say as a group together right now, we're hoping to do this. We believe we have to do this together. We have to do this right, and we have to do it now. So consider joining us. And with that, I'll let us go. Have a great evening.